Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Create with Alex Blake. I'm your host, Alex Blake, and today we are going to get right into it. We are chatting all about brand photography today. Now, some of you guys might be scratching your heads and being like, wait, Alex, what do you know about brand photography? And let me tell you, brand photography, guys, is my secret niche. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek. I obviously have talked about it before on the podcast. So if you're like a longtime listener, you're like, yeah, this is not like big news, Al, you need to chill. But on Instagram, I really don't share a ton about my brands that I get to work with. I really share a lot about seniors, and that's kind of like my main niche. But I work with a lot of Charleston local brands, or just like local to the Carolinas in general. I work with clothing companies. I work with product companies. I work with brands that need headshots. I work with apartment complexes. So I actually do brand shoots quite a bit. They especially pick up during like my slow season for seniors. And then I tend to have a couple here and there over the summer as well. But yeah, I love getting to work with brands, and people, when they do find out that I work with brands, tend to ask me a lot about it because it's something that isn't like shared as much about in our industry as much as it is like, you know, working with like seniors, for example, or just like lifestyle in general portraits, like with weddings or couples and stuff like that. I feel like oftentimes when you don't go to school for photography, then you often just kind of jump into photography when it comes to like portraits like that, like family sessions, couples, stuff like that. And you don't dip your toe as much into the brand world. But when I did, I found that it was like lucrative. I found that it was really fun for me. There's a lot of returning clients. And I also really enjoy that like brand photography is normally during the day rather than like in the evening, unless you have a crazy evening shoot because they really, really want sunset or something like that. For the most part, it's like they're working, so you want it to be like during the workday because they don't want to work in the evening. And so like they also kind of want that, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of nice about working with brands. You don't tend to work on the weekends, again, unless it's like a major brand that's doing something and they really want this good light. It's like they don't want to work on their off time either. So it gives like a really good schedule. And again, like I said, repeat clients. So it's really fun getting to work with brands. I really enjoy all the brand clients that I have. And yeah, so I thought it would be a fun episode to do like how I plan brand shoots from start to finish and like walk you through the planning, the shoot itself, and then the end. But obviously, this is like a very broad overview of it. It's not like the nitty gritty. So if you have any questions as I go through this, feel free to DM me on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and we can chat. So I don't know. Okay, wait, I put this on my Instagram. Before we get into it, I do have to talk about this. I put it on my Instagram that I might change my Instagram name. Yeah, this is big news in my world. It's not big news to anyone else but me, but I've been really thinking a lot about this. I've actually been thinking about it for like the last, like, I don't know, year and a half probably. And I don't know. So my name right now on Instagram is Alex Blake Photography. So if you go to DM me, look that up, but I may or may not have changed it by the time this episode comes out. I think I'm going to change it to Alex Blake Photo. I did a poll on Instagram and it was like a really, really close call between just keeping it Alex Blake Photography or changing it to Alex Blake Photo. And less people said like my full name, like Alex Blake Auto. Less people said that one. And then a couple people said they just don't care what I do, which like, thank you. Because I know that most people don't care. But again, to me, I'm just like, this is crazy because I like built my brand up with Alex Blake Photography. But I feel like Alex Blake Photo just looks really clean and simple. My website is Alex Blake Photo. And so like, it just feels like it would be cohesive and like look simplified. But at the same time, is it that big of a deal? Like enough to change it? I don't know. So if you go to DM me, look up Alex Blake Photography. And if it's not there, go to Alex Blake Photo. Anyway, okay. Let's jump into the meat of the episode. I have some notes for us. And really what I'm going to do is just kind of take us through like, again, like what I do once I've booked a client. So say a brand comes to me, I book them, we go back and forth, blah, 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 blah. We settle on a date. Great. Now what, right? So the first thing that I like to do is understand the brand. And when I say that, I send them a questionnaire. Sometimes I hop on a call with them. A lot of brands really request a call. So a lot of my seniors, I've talked about this on the podcast, but a lot of my seniors, I don't do calls with unless they like really ask me for it or something like that. But it's rare that I would jump on a call with a senior, because I just tend to like be able to get everything that I need from their questionnaire and stuff like that. Once they go through my process, they feel pretty good and they don't really want to hop on a call. But brands are different than that. Brands want to make sure that you're really like understanding their vision and that you can articulate back to them what it is that they desire and that they want. They also a lot of the times really want to see if like your personality and how you function and how you work will fit into their team, because it's often like a team environment, not just like a solo kind of shoot. So it really matters to them that you understand their brand and their vision in general. So a couple like questions that you need to ask is like the basics, right? Like, what is it that I'm photographing? Is it a product? Is it that I'm doing headshots for a service? Is it that you just want like this lifestyle kind of vision shoot, holistic vision shoot for like your brand in general, and you're going to have product placement, but it's not specifically about one product? Is it, you know, multiple colors of something? How many products is it? Like, you need to kind of understand really all of that. And I'll be so real with you guys. Like, it depends on the brand, but if it's a really large brand or a large project, this will actually come before I even book the shoot. So again, depending on the project, if it's like headshots or something like that, sure, we'll book it and then I'll begin to understand the brand and like really dissect it. But if it's like a major project, I'm probably hopping on this call before I ever even actually book. The other thing that you want to ask them is like, who is their audience? What do you want their followers or whatever they're showcasing this? What do you want that audience to feel when they're looking at these photos? You need to understand, yes, the brand, but also like who it is that is going to be seeing these photos and what the brand is wanting to articulate to those people. The other thing that I always ask brands is, what are your brand colors? That's like a simple one, right? And sometimes I can really see it on their website, but if they're a new brand, they're still trying to flesh that out, figure that out. It's even a good question for them to ask themselves, but also it's helpful because when I'm planning and directing this shoot, I can really know, okay, they really love orange, or coral is their color. So we can incorporate this coral coffee mug or something like that, that just like screams their brand in really subtle ways. And they really appreciate it in the end. You also want to know like what they're using these photos for. Yes, who their audience is, right? Like maybe it's their audience is I don't know, middle-aged woman named Pam. And that's like their goal and ideal audience. But where are they using these photos? Are they going to use it on Instagram? Are they going to use it on their website? Are they trying to blow this up on a billboard? And those are really important for usage rights, right? You got to talk about usage rights too. But that might come before booking if you're going to throw in an extra fee for usage rights. But also it's important to know for like how you're taking these images. And if they're just using it on social media, the quality matters, but let's just be real. The intentionality of how you light a photo for social media versus for a billboard, pretty different if you think about it, like, or how you export, what your export settings are on Lightroom. You want to make sure that it's a really, 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 really extra high quality if it's going to be blown up on a billboard versus if they're saying to use it on social media. So it's just something important to think. And then I think like even just asking them, something that I do is asking them what words they would use to describe their brand, and then what words they want to use to describe like this shoot in general. So maybe it's playful and energetic and fun, but maybe it's elevated, luxury, editorial. Maybe it's candid, documentary, like, you know, you want to get those like buzzwords out of the way and really read into what they want specifically for their shoot. So that's always a really important thing, understanding the brand first. I also look through like their socials and I look through their website and their past work so that I can kind of get a feel for what they like. Another question too that I have on my questionnaire for this, and then we can move on, is what are some pain points that you've had with content in the past? And sometimes people are like, no, I got nothing, you know, whatever. And sometimes they're like, I really, really didn't jive with this part of my last shoot, or I really didn't use these photos with my last shoot. And sometimes that's with a different photographer, and that's why they're coming to book me. Other times it's something that like, because like I said, we have repeat clients a lot of the time with brands. Well, maybe they didn't like something that I delivered last time, and it gives them room and space for feedback so that this next time with a shoot, I don't do that little thing, or I don't deliver those photos because they didn't use them, or whatever it is. And I'm able to grow, and we can grow together as like a client and photographer relationship in a really, I think, healthy way, where they feel like they have a place to articulate those things before the next shoot. Okay. Number 2, I build the creative direction. So what I like to do here is like, wait one second. I said this wrong. Okay. What I like to do here is I like to like think through color palettes and props and posing based on what I've understood about their brand, right? So I now understand what their colors are. Like I said, I now understand the vision they're trying to articulate. And now I can kind of put those into creative pieces that we can for sure implement. And sometimes it depends on the brand, but like sometimes I have a couple things. If it's just headshots, we're doing it in my living room, I've got a backdrop. Great. I have some props that I can pull out that I feel like will help you to articulate your brand vision. But sometimes it's like this bigger thing. We're going downtown. We've got a whole team. They are going to come prepared with props. And all I need to do is give them ideas for these props. That's when it's extra fun too, because I feel like that's when you can really go creative and go wild with your creativity, where it's like, we should get this car. Here's a like car rental agency and they have a green one and that's your brand colors. It would be awesome. You're going for 60s. Great. Here's a little pink figgy in Charleston that we can use. You know, like you can go like crazy. We can even like, it's really fun when it's like a bigger brand, because you can even be like, you should email this hotel and see if we can shoot there. Like it's less on your hands to do those things versus if you're doing like headshots for branding, most of the time, like you're kind of the it girl for like, or guy. My guys, sorry, where you're like the it person who can go and like really email, but like you're kind of being like the coordinator of it at the same time. A lot of the time with bigger shoots, they'll have a coordinator. So that's kind of nice too. But yeah, as you're building that creative direction, sometimes they'll give you inspo and sometimes you lead it. So again, that goes back to like how big the production is. Sometimes it's like they have a whole slide deck that they want to walk you through. You have multiple phone calls, you know, the whole shebang. But other times it's like, no, you're creating the vision, you're creating the inspo, very similar to how you would with a couple or a senior or something like that. But I do want to like distinctively say that even when it is headshots, there is a difference between working with a couple, a senior, or whatever, like a portrait kind of styled shoot versus working with a brand, because there needs to be intentionality behind every image where you are telling the story of that brand. And yes, it's the same in the sense of like you're telling the story of that couple, you're telling the story of that senior, but it is a little bit different where it's like, in a sense, this is going to sound bad, but in a sense, it's like a fake story. And I don't mean it in that like every story or every brand obviously has their like startup story, right? And that's a beautiful, real story of how they got their start, their entrepreneur, whatever it is. But eventually, if you're doing like a lifestyle campaign shoot for a cooler brand, well, you're probably just telling this like fake made up story of this group of friends that went to the lake and had a bonfire, and that party didn't actually even happen, right? So there is a difference in that, like, you have to be intentional about creating the story through your images, not just telling the story through your images, if that makes sense. Okay, the next thing that we talk about is styling and outfits. And really, it's very similar to the creative direction. You're taking what you now understand about their brand and you're helping them to portray that. So this specifically goes for product shoots and goes for headshots. But obviously, if it's like a clothing brand, they're coming already styled, right? Like you don't have to worry about that as a photographer most of the time, unless they're like shipping you the clothes or something like that. But if it's a product, like how do the clothes really not distract from the product, but add to it? Or, you know, different props that you're thinking about with like styling. Is it that a purse takes away from the thing they're holding in their hand if they're holding a purse too? So you need to get rid of the purse. Like you just have to think about a way to really highlight what it is that you're specifically trying to highlight in the photo. And there can be more distractions when you're doing that with a brand. So you have to think about that. And then also even just with like, and we're about to get to location scouting in a minute, but if it's like a background, how does that background support the feel of the product? So speaking of backgrounds, let's get to location scouting. That's the fourth thing we want to talk about, location scouting. So obviously similar to any other portrait lifestyle kind of shoot that you're going to do. Do you shoot in a studio? Do you shoot in an Airbnb? Do you shoot outdoors? Do you shoot in nature, downtown, beach? The way that I specifically think about location scouting is going back to those colors. What is the story that I'm trying to tell? So how can like my colors relay the story? So my friend Cassidy just put out a podcast about this actually, but she was talking about color theory. So if you want to, you should go listen to that too. She was talking about, okay, blue typically is like a sad feel, kind of like Inside Out, the movie, you know what I'm talking about? Or like red can feel like passion or anger or drive, you know? And so you can think about it that way, but also going back to understanding their brand. If I'm trying to like portray these colors as their brand colors, how can I use the background, even if it's just downtown or even if it's nature or the beach or whatever, how can I use that to really tell the story as well and elevate and highlight that brand? So yeah. Okay. Next thing is create a shot list. And I'll be so real with you guys. I don't really use a shot list. Like I have one on my website for sale for my seniors. And that's like my most go-to kind of poses. And it's like $5, but people will buy it and download it and they use it as a shot list. But really it's just like my most go-to poses. And I typically don't really need a shot list. So it's not something that I'm there like checking off, but if you need it, I have it for seniors. But for like couples and stuff like that, for a wedding day, I used to do that when I did weddings. And I know a lot of photographers that still do that. There's nothing wrong with that, nothing bad with that. But with a brand, I am like, no, I need a shot list. If it's headshots, I don't feel like I do it as much, but really like for bigger shots or like complexes, like I work with a couple apartment complexes and those are big major brands. Like, and they're giving me a lot of freedom with it where like a lot of the time the manager won't really like walk with me. She'll say, okay, you've got it. Cause they've already had those phone calls with me. They've made their slide deck, showed me all the things. And now it's like all in my hands. And sometimes that can feel a little bit intimidating. So I make a shot list because I want to make sure that I have articulated to the brand, these are the photos I'm going to get. Anything extra is extra and it's fun, right? But these are the ones I'm for sure going to get. Do you see anything that like doesn't look like you want it, or it needs to shift, or it needs to change, whatever? Do you see something that isn't on here that needs to be added? And that way we have really good communication. They know what's going to be delivered. And I know I can go and get those photos, boom, 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 no big deal. And yes, it leaves room for creativity in the moment. If I see something, I'll take it. But also I really like for brand shoots for it to feel really straightforward. So I love a good shot list. One thing to note is sometimes I create the shot list. Sometimes the brand creates the shot list. So I worked with a clothing company. It was probably, I guess it was last year, like last January or February. It's called Vici, if you guys know what Vici is, but they were awesome because they came with the whole shot list. But the reason that they did that is because they were not on site. They're based in California. They did the shoot in Charleston with a girl in Southern Charm. That's like my claim to fame, is that I shot a girl in Southern Charm, which is really cool. But anyway, she was doing like a brand collaboration with them. She was here, they were there. And so they just hired me, but kind of sent me like free willingly to this place, like by myself, you know, it was just solo. And I brought an assistant and it was a fun shoot, but I'm so glad that they gave me a shot list so that I could make sure, okay, I need 5 images, front, back, to the side of this thing. And then we need 2 lifestyle images, 1 for cell phone, 1 for website. Like that would be like a lot going on if I had to come up with everything for that. But because they weren't here, they were able to like really get nitpicky with it. And again, sometimes that's a little bit harder because you're like, oh, I got to make sure I get all of these shots. But I also appreciate the communication side of it because I truly can like go off the list and check it off. So I keep it in my notes app, and sometimes it's really, really helpful. Especially when you're getting like everything like we were for that shoot where it was like for the website, we got to do e-com, right? For social media, we got to do the fun lifestyle ones, stuff she's going to post. Like when you're getting everything, it's really helpful to have the shot list. But if you are working with a brand, you should just ask them, hey, would you like to create the shot list or would you like me to? And again, sometimes they do it, sometimes you do it, but either way, shot lists are important. And then during the shoot, I always think variety is better. So if they give me a shot list and it just says front of shirt and it doesn't say wide, like full body or cropped in, I'm going to get both and I'm going to deliver both most likely because I want them to make sure, or I want to make sure that I'm getting them exactly what they're wanting. So make sure you're getting variety of like full body product close-ups, team photos. If you have headshots, you're getting like team photos with different pairings, not just the whole group. You're getting a side profile shot for the headshot too. You're getting them sitting, walking, and filler shots where you're just getting like random little like products for, or like colors that match them or whatever at the location that you're shooting so that they can really like fill in their website or their socials however they want. The other thing at the shoot that I think is important to talk about too is that you have to balance like showing up in a way that feels like you because you're a creative freelance photographer, but also in a way that feels like it meets their corporate professional side, because I think like that is something that I've definitely seen with those bigger brands. When it's like service-based people, you're doing headshots, come as you are. It's very similar to as if you just have like a regular lifestyle kind of client, but it is different with like when you're working with like corporate people. If you come in and you're looking a little bit like not put together, or like you were just hanging out at the pool 10 minutes before your call, like that is just like not the vibe sometimes. And I don't think they appreciate it. So when I show up to shoots, I'm coming up to the shoot and I'm going to look more professional than I might going to the beach to do a senior session. You know, like I'm going to look a little more put together. I'm going to really like, you know, obviously I'm always polite, but you know what I mean? I'm not going to be like, hey girl, you know, I'm going to say, hey, how are you today? So excited. Can't wait for the shoot, you know, blah, 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 blah. So really like balancing who you are with the professional at the same time. The other thing during the shoot is that you need to be really flexible as things shift, because things can change on a dime with a brand shoot. Like things are always happening. There's always a little bit of craziness there. Like hair and makeup runs long, a model is late. Like there's just a lot of moving parts with it. The creative director, if you're working with one, you know, changes things up last minute. And you know what? You're not doing that location. Sorry, you know, and you've got to figure out your lighting a little bit differently, because you might not be the one saying this is where the model's going to stand. The creative director might say, actually, we want this background. And you're like, all right, let me shift around my settings, you know? So you've always got to be kind of like, I don't know, flexible and ready for like quick pivots. Yeah. And then the other thing during the shoot is having really good communication. So again, I really like the shot list because of the good communication. But during a shoot too, if something isn't looking good on camera, it is a little bit different with a brand shoot rather than with like a lifestyle portrait shoot, unless it's headshots for a team, where like you don't really have to be afraid of offending the person on accident. Obviously, we're always going to be very kind to our models and really celebrate them, tell them they look beautiful and all the things. But they're also used to it when you can say, you know what, that angle doesn't really work for this. Can we actually have you flip the other way? And it's totally fine. Again, we say it in a polite way, but we don't ever have to worry about like them feeling like super insecure because they're like, oh no, that angle doesn't work for me and I already don't look good on camera. Like, no, they're fine. You can tell them that the angle doesn't work and switch things around if it's not reading well. Because you really have to be very careful about your time too. A lot of the time for brand shoots, you've been booked for full day, half day, or hourly. And with a couple, sometimes it's like fun to go a little over and stuff like that. But if you go over for like a brand shoot, especially if it's like you are in charge of the time and like really pushing things along, if you don't have a creative director, the brand is paying for maybe sometimes hair and makeup to stay on set. They're paying for you. They're paying for other vendors, right? For anything like if they did rent a car or something like that, they're paying for the models. Obviously, we need to honor their time in general. And so like things can add up for them. So you need to make sure that like there's really good communication on set where if things need to change, then you talk to them, they talk to you, they give you the okay if you're going to stay longer or whatever. So definitely all of those things during the shoot. And then the last thing is the post-shoot editing and delivery. So when you are editing for a product or for a clothing brand, it's a little bit different than just slapping your presets on and calling it good. And obviously I say that super tongue in cheek because like we never just slap presets on and call it good. We always edit. We always make sure that it looks really, really good. Even when we use presets, right? There's no preset that's going to be like one and done, copy paste. It doesn't work like that. But when you're working with a brand or like a clothing item, you have to match that color to the correct color really, really well. And sometimes it takes a long time. Like sometimes it's actually quite annoying because the whole goal is that when somebody buys this product or somebody buys this clothing item, it would look like the product when they receive it that they bought online. You know what I mean? Like if they're looking at our photo online and that pink shirt looks orange, so they're expecting an orange shirt, and then they open it up and it's pink, the brand is going to be pretty upset because they're going to return that item and they're going to give it a bad review. And who does that ultimately fall back on? Their photographer, whether the brand realizes it or not, you know? So we have to be really careful about making something look really cool, really vibey. If it's for like a lifestyle campaign, that might be a little bit different. But if it is for like e-com, like those website shoots, you have to be really cautious about that. So that's definitely something to think about. Also, curation is really key. Like when you are culling through those photos, you need to be thinking about what the brand asked for, and then also how many photos the brand is going to, during their workday, need to look through. I worked with an apartment complex a year-ish ago, I guess. And one of the things that they told me when they were booking me is that their last photographer gave them way too many photos and they were overwhelmed by it. So they actually asked me to really slim down, and per shoot, I think I gave them like 20 photos. And I worked with them for like 3 months, and so it was like once a week. For 3 months, they got 20 photos at a time. But for them, looking at 20 photos at a time versus I think their other photographer gave them like 200 or something, it was way too many for them to cull through. And it's just of a building. They just don't need that many. Like they need me to pick the very, very best ones and give them that. Again, if it's clothing, it might feel different. If you're working with a person, it might feel different. But really making sure that you're not overwhelming them with how many photos they get. And then the other thing to remember when you're culling through, and this was like a really helpful thing for me to kind of shift in my mindset, is that I'm not always looking for the best photo of the model. And I know that sounds terrible, but hear me out, okay? You're looking for the best photo of the product or the best photo of the clothing item, whatever it is, right? The best photo of the space that the model is standing in. And the model obviously needs to look good in the photo. Their face can't be like half sneezing or something like that. But sometimes there's a photo that looks the best of the model, but not the best of the product. So I go with the one where the product looks the best and the model looks good versus great. You know what I mean? Like you have to think about it that way. And then also thinking about the fact that like this model sees photos of themselves all the time and they're looking at themselves in a different way when they're looking at those photos than a couple when they get their photos back and it's their first time seeing themselves in professional photos. Like you just have to think of it in a little bit of a different way, and it helps you to cull in a different way. The other thing to note about editing and stuff is that when you're working with brands, they often request quicker turnaround. So for me, for my seniors, my turnaround time is 3 weeks. For a brand, a lot of the time, they're not thinking that fast. It depends on the brand too. I worked with this children's clothing brand, and they were awesome because they thought so far ahead. They were incredible clients to work with because genuinely they like worked like months and months ahead on the next season. That was great, but that's not every brand, especially if you live in a smaller area where it's like not, you know, massive brands, right? Like it's not like these New York brands or something. They actually were a New York brand. So maybe that's why, maybe that's why they planned ahead. But if you're working with, you know, like me, downtown Charleston brands that have 1 to 2 to 3, you know, different areas or whatever, they're working like way closer to the timeline that they actually need the photos back by so that they can launch their product. And like with these bigger brands that are like really planning ahead, they're not waiting on our photos back wait, what am I saying? They're not waiting on their photos back in order to launch the product. But for smaller businesses, they are. As soon as they get those photos back, they're putting them on the website and cranking it out, right? And like, we don't want to be the reason that somebody can't launch something. So the way that I do that is I offer them like a 2-week turnaround time, I think is most of the time what I offer them. But then I also have like rush fees. And maybe that's something you would want to implement too. I have like a 1 week, a 72-hour, and a 24-hour. If it's an event or something like that, most of the time they'll go straight for that 24-hour rush fee. But a lot of the time, if it's a product, they'll do like 1 week, I would say. And then the other thing that I was going to say on that before we are finished with our episode for the day is that I use Pass Gallery, and I have the link in the show notes if you guys want to use it, but that's what I use to deliver all of my photos all the time. Doesn't matter if it's a brand or anything else. And it's amazing. I have been using it since day one and I love Pass Gallery, but, the thing that is cool about it too is you can have a person pay per image if you want. And so I most of the time have like free downloads for my clients, but when it's a brand, there are certain times where I'll deliver a lot of images, but I have said that they'll only get this many deliverables and they can pick and choose which ones they decide to purchase. And sometimes they'll over purchase and they'll purchase the whole gallery. But they can have like 10 free downloads and then the rest of them are however much, or something like that. So just kind of fun to think about too, like the different ways that, again, it can be lucrative. The other thing that I did want to talk about super quickly is usage rights. And everybody does usage rights a little bit differently, but basically what that means is like, how long can your photos be used by this brand and how can they use them? So if it's unlimited usage rights for an unlimited amount of time, they can use those photos however they want, whenever they want, to sell whatever they want. It doesn't really matter. But there are times where it's limited usage rights for 1 year, where they can use it on social media, but they can't use it on their website. They can use it on social media and their website, but they can't use it on a billboard. And once that 1 year, time expires, they can choose to renew their usage. But a lot of that costs, right? So it costs to use my product for this amount of time. If they renew it, it costs the same amount, sometimes less, depending on what they're using it for, something like that. The thing to think about a lot of the time, if you're working with smaller brands, they don't even know what that is. And so I often just bundle it into my price. Don't even talk about it. They don't need to know. They just know they can use the photos. However, if it's a larger brand, they know the word usage rights. And so we're able to work through what that means together and what they need together. And that's really helpful. The other thing is that often if it's a big brand, then they'll work with third-party vendors and brands as well. So for example, for the apartment complexes that I work for, they also work with design companies. And so there's a designer that's coming in and I'm taking pictures and stuff of their furniture or their decor and all of that kind of stuff. And so they might want to reach out to me and use those photos as well. But because they're a larger brand, they know they need to purchase those usage rights before using it. And so that's another lucrative way too of selling that company your usage rights, and then they're able to use those photos. And it's great too, because then you can also pitch to them and hopefully get a new client out of it, which happened with me in a design company. So that's kind of nice. But okay, that is pretty much all I have. Man, I just yapped your ear off, but I hope this was helpful if you're interested in brand photography at all, or if you've just never even known about it, or if you're just listening to this because you like the sound of my voice. I love you so much and thank you for listening. Okay, one quick reminder that PhotoCamp signups are still open. One cabin is full. Another one is quickly filling up. So make sure that if you want to save your spot to PhotoCamp, you do that now. It's photocampinfo.com or PhotoCamp events on Instagram. Okay, guys, I love you guys so much, and I will see you next Thursday. Bye.